So Pearl, like I said, is from director Ty West. His second feature this year is an anomaly. Pearl is the story of a young girl working on her parents' farm in like 1918, I think it's set. That's the year. Um, loves going into town to watch the silent movies and the talkies and the girls dance on screen. She wants to be a star someday. But Pearl has two parents who are incredibly overbearing, a very stern mother, and a father who is invalid. He's in a wheelchair and can't speak. And despite like her longing to get out and become something more like Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz, she just can't seem to get away. And this all goes awry when she develops a violent temper, I'll say. And we quickly descend into the Chop House horror madness that we saw earlier this year in X. It is a small cast, it is a small feature. Andy, what did you think of Pearl?
Man, I really enjoyed this, and I wasn't sure which way it would go because I was a big fan of X, and I was a little worried that this would maybe try and be the same film, just set 50 years before, but it really stands on its own. It's definitely complemented by it's the first movie X, but it's so much its own thing. It's just shot entirely differently. It looks like there's these bright yellows and reds. It's like Technicolor. It looks a lot like there's been a lot of comparisons to the Wizard of Oz. It has the same kind of old timey 1930s, 1940s sweeping score by Tyler Bates. It's just has a different feel, look, and it has similarities. There's similar themes and parallels to X, but it's different at the same time. That there's similar themes of like repressed sexuality, of kind of female entrapment within society, and these kind of different roles. And it's fascinating. And I was kind of engaged just the whole time, and you know where it's going kind of the whole way. There aren't like big surprises or big gotcha moments, but it's the journey to get there that's really fascinating.
Right. I think part of the problem with Pearl on its face is one, it lands firmly in a time when like society is pretty tired of prequels and sequels. And the idea that like, oh, there's a cheeky prequel we shot simultaneously with this movie you didn't know about called X, like is cool, but like ultimately it feels like it might be a little shallow. And additionally, uh Pearl as a character is not that deep in X. She is the old lady who lives at this house that all of these traveling kids get to shoot their little, porno film. X is really rad, by the way. You should check out X. X is great. So Pearl's not that deep. She's got a husband and she's got a bit of an emotional center in X, but like she's also kind of an old psycho killer, so you don't really think a lot about it, right? Like you're not focused on her in X, you're focused on the other characters. This movie walks it back and says, no, 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 she's the star here. That's what she's going to be. This girl who wants so badly to get out of her small town and become something big. And uniquely, Mia Goth, who has her first screenwriting credit, helping Ty West write this movie and also starring, man, she dials it all the way up to 11 and she doesn't pull her foot off the gas once. And she is so good in this movie as this twisted up woman who just wants to be something more, like who just wants to get out, right? The dream every kid from every musical has ever had, right? A kid who's got an I Want song, like she just wants to be a star. And she just can't figure it out. And the trailer looks like it gives a lot away. And I think that's the other thing that might hurt this movie's box office returns. Like you see the trailer and you kind of think you know what's going on there. But I was really pleased to find that, like, while it is different from X. You can't walk in thinking it's just going to be the sequel or anything. Um, it's got a really unique energy. There's something really cool happening in this movie, so I'm glad we have the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, her performance in this it's incredible. Like it's legitimately Oscar worthy. We'll see if it gets
There's
recognized
there's
for
no
that.
way. There's no way she should. Honestly, probably nom worthy in my opinion, but I there's no way this
Yeah,
gets a
I mean,
nom.
I was really surprised, and it's not all the time, but I was telling Zach after we had watched it that she could have turned it up to 8, and it would have been an all you need for the film. It would have gotten the job done. Would have been great. but she goes to 11. Like she like think of the best monologues, the best pieces of acting you've ever seen. Like she goes there for several moments in this film, and it's incredible. Like
Yeah.
absolutely. There's a point where she has like a 6 to 7 minute monologue. That's incredible. She just has some really long scenes, and she just when she kind of loses her temper and goes over the top, it's just incredible pieces of acting, just yelling, crying, ugly crying, tears. It's incredible. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's so easy to write her character as just a violent person in a corner, right? Like, especially coming out of X, because that's what Pearl is in that movie. But instead, like, they go the opposite way, and they turn Pearl into this like stunningly tragic individual, who's just kind of a victim of her own trappings, I guess, who just can't escape this mess that she's made that just begins to snowball into a bigger and bigger problem. And by the time you get to the end, by the time you get to where we're headed with X, like it kind of makes sense, but it's that extra layer. Like that's what makes it work. Like that, I really think that's the gooey center to this movie. Along with, I should say, some of the visuals, which are simple but striking. Like I said, Ty West wrote this movie with Mia Goth during the pandemic, during quarantine, when they couldn't shoot X. They were locked down. They couldn't do anything, and he said, "Hey, I had this idea for kind of a prequel." They fleshed it out, and they opted to use the sets from X before they demolished them all. I think they shot X in New Zealand, I want to
Yeah.
say, which is crazy because it totally passes for Texas. Maybe not so much in this movie. This one's a bit more whimsical and fantasy. The saturation's turned up a little bit in this one. Looks a little like Wizard of Oz, except obviously Wizard of Oz was black and white. It's going to be your kind of Technicolor rainbow kind of movie. The sky is super blue and the grass is super green and the blood is super red.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of what's going on here. And everybody's wearing old school outfits. It's the early 1900s. It's the time of influenza, which there's an interesting reflection of the pandemic when they shot the film versus the people in this movie. Lots of people wearing masks. They're talking about, hey, you don't have the bug, do you? Like it's great. I think the movie has a really cool setting and it creates like a really refreshing but close to home feeling with like the first film where you're getting the same house and like the same barn and the same bunkhouse. That stuff's really neat.
Yeah, it's really incredible that they were able to use the exact same sets and still make a very different movie. X is very much a kind of classic slasher movie. Teens getting killed, killer on the loose. This is more in the veins of something like Misery, Stephen King's work, with Annie Wilkes, played by I can't.
Kathy Bates.
Thank you. She
Yeah,
won an Oscar for that. It's that kind of movie. It's someone slowly going over the edge, someone slowly losing their mind, turning to murder to solve their problems, and kind of revealing other horrors within. And you feel for Pearl because she is really trapped she's trapped on this farm. She has this overbearing mother. Her father is kind of had a stroke. It's insinuated he's had a stroke from having Spanish flu. She's been married. She got married to this American GI who's she hasn't seen in years because he's been overseas fighting the Great War. So she can't even like remarry to anyone that she sees. It's really, she's frustrated in her lot in life, and she really can't stand it. She wants to do something about it, and I think that that's something that a lot of people can relate to.
yeah, like this buildup of like ambition and temptation, the frustrations of having like a mother who just will not let off the gas as far as like being stern is concerned. Her mom is like so particular in this movie. The dad who doesn't talk but like he just can't express himself at all. The husband who's away. Like all of that builds into the person that Pearl is going to become. And I think what's clever is the subtext that's written under that, like the idea that her husband is away and she meets a local projectionist at the movie theater who's really charming and handsome, and she starts to pine for him but feels like she can't. Like all of that adds something that like is not present in the trailer, and that's the stuff that works. Because I was a little skeptical going in. Like I it just seems like a movie that would not normally hit the big screen. Like it seems like a movie I would go watch at like the local indie Cineplex, and then we'd talk about on the show. We'd say it's bold cinema, move right past it. I love that this is in theaters. Like you can just go watch this anywhere. It's this level of like, I don't know. It's a step past elevated horror, right? I want to compare it to something like Barbarian or Malignant or X, like this kind of new space that horror is traveling into of like the extreme and the art house turned back on itself to make something like Bright Red Blood totally work, right? And present horror in stark daylight, which is a lot of what this movie does. People get killed like in the middle of a sunny field in the middle of the day, like, and it like it presents itself in a space that like I don't know a lot of other horror movies are doing, and I think it's really neat.
Yeah, like you said, like we said earlier, it's this very bright world. It reminds me a lot of like Pollyanna, these 19 or 60s Disney films with kind
Yeah.
of this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, naive ingenue, which is totally what Pearl is. You know, you almost expect her to break into song at the very beginning because she's like talking with her animals. She's like, "Hello, Mr. Cow, it's me. I can't wait to
Yeah.
see you." You know, but then the more you get to know about her life, it's terrible. Like has this really abusive, overbearing mother who controls basically her every movement, and there's just so much. She's so limited and stuck on the farm. And it's yeah, it's so different in a lot of ways, and still, you know, it's not kind of jump scare scary. It's not that kind of horror. It's just it's very disturbing, and it's a lot about mood and a lot about like scenes that will haunt you for days to come, without having cheap scares.
Yeah, like Ty West talked about in an interview his kind of inspiration from something like a Hitchcock movie, which this movie in a lot of ways feels like. The farmhouse on a hill by itself starts to feel an awful lot like the Bates Motel from Psycho, right? Even Pearl's like general demeanor throughout the film. At one point, she's wearing her hair up in a bun and a dress. She looks just like Norman Bates dressed as his mother. The mental scare, right? Like the buildup of horror like over time is what this movie does well. I do think it's not without issues. I thought it suffered a bit in pacing in its first two acts. There was a bit very explicitly in the middle where I told Andy after we saw it, I was like, that was the moment I realized I was bored sitting in the movie theater. It comes around by act 3 though. Overall, I was really pleased with the package, and I think a lot of that pacing is assisted by visuals, Mia Goth's performance, and like Andy said, the music, which is super good in this movie, and it's like very insistent. It's like an old orchestra. It plays throughout a lot of it. Very cinematic. Who is the composer on this?
Tyler Bates.
Tyler Bates.
He scored 300.
Okay, all right. No slouch, Mr. Bates. Yeah, I wouldn't put it past him.
That's what I know him best for, and some other he's done a number of other well-known scores.
Any other thoughts on this one before recommendations, Andy?
I think I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend Pearl?
Absolutely. If you're a fan of horror, if you're a fan of new horror and always want to see what's new in the slasher killer genre, definitely go see it. It's fun. It's disturbing. Has a great female protagonist. Incredible performance from Mia Goth, who is becoming a horror icon in her own right. Especially if you've seen X, definitely check this out. I want to go back and rewatch X to see like parallels and different ways the movies connect as well. But really highly recommend.
Same here. I think Pearl's a ton of fun. It's not for everybody. I wouldn't recommend it to like, your parents to go see it or anything unless they want to see something particularly off the wall and a little grisly. But it's cool, man. Yeah, these two movies make for a really good double feature. They got a really unique energy to them. I am looking forward to Maxine. That's coming next. There's a teaser at the end of the Pearl credits. I was bummed. It's not much more than the one we've already seen after Toronto International Film Festival. If you've seen that one online, that's what you're getting. Hopefully we get some footage soon. I hope that is able to meet the same quality of these two, but so far Ty West is 2-0 here. Like if he can pull it out, I think he's produced a brilliant horror trilogy in less than 2 years, which is wild.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see Maxine.